President Biden and former President Trump both making trips to the southern border this week on the very same day. This amidst a busy week on the campaign trail ahead of Super Tuesday this past week. There were two Republican primaries. Last weekend it was South Carolina. Nikki Haley lost by 20 points there in her home state. It was an even wider margin Tuesday night in Michigan. Former President Trump winning by some 40 points as he continues to rack up delegates leading into Super Tuesday. And with the news this past week that some of his trials may not happen for several months because of the Supreme Court taking up his appeal on whether he has presidential immunity. Let's talk about it all with our panel right now. Here with us this week, we have former state party chair for the Indiana Democrats, Robin Winston, and for the Republicans, former state lawmaker Mike Murphy. Along with the doctors in the House today, our professors of political science, Dr. Martin Sweet from Purdue University and Dr. Laura Wilson from the University of Indianapolis. So Laura, I'll start with you. Between the primaries in South Carolina and Michigan and the Supreme Court taking up Trump's call for immunity, it seems more and more likely every day that he'll be the Republican nominee. And even if the Supreme Court doesn't rule in his favor ultimately, that timeline could help push all of these trials back to the fall or perhaps even after the election.
Sure, the timeline feels very uncomfortable. Increasingly, it seems that it won't necessarily be decided by the election. But even when you're looking at Super Tuesday, we're talking about 16 states, one territory. No candidate would clinch it alone. But given how close Trump is relative to Nikki Haley, and then same thing for Biden, it just seems like this will be that next big surge, nearly a third of American voters in the primary, that's going to push them even closer to eventually becoming the Republican and the Democratic Party nominee.
16 states voting Tuesday. Martin, two stories that kind of seem to fit together this week. It's hard to discuss anything related to the Supreme Court without mentioning the legacy of Mitch McConnell, who's going to be stepping down from his leadership position. He hasn't endorsed Trump yet. We'll see if he does. Regardless, his prior decisions not to back that second impeachment and his decision not to seat Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court continue to have real long-lasting implications that could echo through the years to come.
Yeah, McConnell, I think, probably is the single most consequential member of Congress we've had really in the last quarter century. The legacy certainly with the courts looms large. The infighting with Trump, I think, is certainly part of the story, and you're seeing now, both MAGA Republicans sort of going after Mitch McConnell in the same way folks on the left are going after Mitch. And so I think when you have that kind of legacy, when you're getting attacked from both sides, you're probably doing something right. But certainly his control over the Supreme Court and keeping Garland off the court and bringing in Gorsuch really in that seat, a legend.
Has shaped the course of history, no doubt. Mike, your thoughts not only on McConnell's legacy, but also the timing of his decision with the former president still holding the influence that he does within the GOP this election year?
Well, first of all, I tend to agree with Martin, but I'd even go further than that. I would say he's the most consequential senator since Lyndon Johnson took over the majority in, 48 or so. It's that big of his influence. I knew, actually, I'm old enough to have known McConnell when he was the county judge executive of Jefferson County, Kentucky. And he hasn't changed in 40 years. I mean, everything is very, very thoughtful. There's not much emotion to it. He's certainly not, the telegenic, speaker. But he always has a plan, and he plays the plan, and he almost always wins. As far as his impact long term, I think it's going to be felt for decades, just like Lyndon Johnson's was felt for decades.
Robin, of course, his legacy when it comes to the courts viewed very differently depending on which side of the aisle you're on. I want to get your thoughts on that, but also on the primary this past week in Michigan. President Biden won handily, but about 15% of Michigan Democrats voted uncommitted, a protest vote because of his handling of the war in Israel. Who should be more concerned at this point, in your view, about bringing their party together in the fall, President Biden or President Trump? In Michigan, at least, both seem to have some segment of their party unwilling to back them, at least for the moment.
So I want Donald Trump to take it easy. As long as 30% of the people are voting against you, keep it up, buddy. Keep doing that. On the Biden side, when we say 15% voted uncommitted, that's not unusual. 12% voted that way when Barack Obama was on the ballot in 2012. That's an option that Michiganders have, and sometimes that's their protest. But they are not saying I'm voting against Joe Biden in November. The people that voted for Nikki Haley are saying they don't want to vote for Donald Trump, so keep it up. As far as McConnell, I knew him when I was in Louisville. He's been pragmatic, he's been steady. What they have not talked about is the largesse that he has brought in federal funding to the University of Louisville, to Kentucky,
state of
all
Kentucky,
across
yeah.
the state. He's
Yeah.
delivered for them on that.
Martin, I want to talk about this Michigan thing as well. You consulted Marco Rubio on Israeli policy. How do you see that whole dynamic playing out politically this year in the midst of everything else happening overseas?
Right. For the most part, Republicans are quite unified on Israel. You've always had a couple gadflies, Ron Paul, and then now maybe Rand somewhat. But for the most part, Republicans are quite unified. Democrats have an issue, right? Israel has become an incredibly partisan thing. We saw this a lot of this started with Obama, right? And the snubbing of Netanyahu when he came in to speak before the joint houses of Congress. And it's got a legacy now. And you now have members of the squad in Congress actively pro-Hamas. It's a problem for the Democrats.
Laura, let's also talk about the Indiana Election Commission's rulings this week. They voted to keep President Trump on the ballot. They did remove Senate candidate John Rust, as expected, who's still trying to fight this very uphill legal battle. He says he'll take this to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary. But of course, as we just mentioned, they've got a lot on their hands already.
They do. I think they have a pretty full docket, and they've made space for things that they need to. I think with John Rust, it's really tricky because he voted in the 2016 primary and the 2012. Where was he in 2018? Where was he in 2020? He had the opportunity that this didn't even have to go to the IEC. Them removing him obviously is a really big win for the parties in terms of their strength. But I also think individually as a candidate, that was something he could have avoided. He chose not to. His removal ultimately means Banks is really in there in terms of the U.S. Senate race.
And Mike, obviously Banks remains a heavy favorite in this race. You think there's any chance Rust tries to run as a third-party candidate or independent?
Third parties don't, I mean, you can, sure, but third parties don't win in Indiana. It's a two-party state.
You don't think
Has
that would
been
change the
forever.
dynamic in
No,
the
not
race
at all.
if
If he
finds
gets
his
2
way
or
on the ballot?
3%, you know, okay, great.
I posed that question to Rust this week, by the way. He said he didn't plan to run as an independent because he still feels confident he can somehow get back on the ballot as a Republican. We'll see. Robin, we saw the interviews earlier with the Democratic candidates for Senate, including Mark Carmichael and Valerie McRae. Obviously an uphill climb for Democrats in this Senate race, given our state's politics and the resources that Banks has on hand. And now he's uncontested in the primary, while Democrats are dealing with a contested race.
Yeah, everybody has a date of destiny on May 7th in this primary, but it's going to take a lot of resources to beat Jim Banks. That's, at least you made a precursor in that. They just have to get their campaign at the grassroots level, try to get as many people to the polls as they can, and see what national events come on.
All right, coming up next, the compromise at the State House to keep the blue line alive in Indianapolis. Stick around. We'll be right back.